Every week, Surfing the MASH Tsunami brings you major stories from the world of steatotic liver disease. This week, the entire episode is a roundtable focused on a major news story, the approval of Semaglutide for the treatment of non-cirrhotic MASH, making it the second approved agent in the U.S. and pushing MASH therapy onto a whole new exciting plateau.
For the last 5 years, MASH LD stakeholders, whether manufacturers, trial sites, providers, payers, patients, or investors, have turned to Surfing the MASH Tsunami to keep track of drug and device development, epidemiology, public health initiatives, and practice patterns. This weekend, we have divided our special episode on semaglutide's approval in the U.S. into 3 chapters so you can listen to each one over a shorter, discrete period of time. We hope you enjoy them.
Surfing the MASH Tsunami is sponsored by these healthcare-related organizations.
Regeneron is a leading biotechnology company that invents, develops, and commercializes life-transforming medicines for serious diseases. Founded and led by physician scientists, their unique ability to repeatedly translate science into medicine has led to numerous approved treatments and product candidates in development, most of which were homegrown in their laboratories. They are shaping the next frontier of medicine with data-powered insights from the Regeneron Genetics Center and pioneering genetic medicine platforms, enabling them to identify innovative targets and complementary approaches to potentially treat diseases like obesity and MASH.
LiverRight and the LiverRight Scanning Network. LiverRight is America's first virtual specialty clinic for liver disease, offering adults in all 50 states video appointments and helping GI practices and health systems triage and treat the swelling numbers of patients seeking MASLD and MASH testing. LiverRight offers same-week video visits and accepts insurance. For more information, contact LiverRight. That's liver then R-I-G-H-T as if one word, at www.liverright.com.
Tawazun Health, your partner in global liver health innovation. At Tawazun Health, we specialize in providing small or large-scale access to FibroScan examinations for liver health-focused early detection, clinical trials, independent research, and collaborative projects with clinicians and FibroScan providers, now in over 30 countries around the globe. As industry-leading experts, we design and deliver high-quality FibroScan services because we know that accurate, high-quality, reliable data drives better outcomes. To learn about Tawazun Health or our sister lifestyle app, mylife365.me, click the Tawazun Health link on the Surfing MASH homepage. This conversation shares the first segment of our special roundtable, exploring the likely impact of the recent FDA approval of semaglutide for patients living with non-cirrhotic MASH.
This first conversation takes a look at some of the immediate short-term effects of the semaglutide approval. The panelists start by describing their enthusiasm and sense of fulfillment that 2 drugs have now been approved in the U.S. and many more are in late-stage development. Plus, the FDA is taking a look at a path of approval that's not based on liver biopsy, all exciting things. One interesting takeaway in this conversation is that the approval of semaglutide will energize the class more than it might have an effect on the specific number of patients treated, since many of the patients who might be on therapy already received semaglutide or have tried it. One exciting opportunity, though, is have probably had their prescriptions refused up until this point in time. If they have MASH, the MASH prescription is more likely to be accepted. So what we're likely to see more of, our panelists say, is education and awareness, and that will get bigger, wider, deeper, all exciting things. So as I was saying in the introduction, this is a news week. Last week, while I was on vacation, we had back-to-back news about resmetirom being approved by the EMA, and then about semaglutide being approved by FDA for use in MASH and MASLD. We will have a discussion next week on the resmetirom EMA issue, but today we're fortunate to be joined by 4 of America's leading visionaries when it comes to these kinds of issues. I'm going to go in alphabetical order because that's the easiest way to do this. Manal Abdelmalek, who hasn't been with us for a while, but is a good friend of the podcast. Manal, how are you this afternoon?
Oh, wonderful. Thanks for having me back, Roger.
Delighted to have you here. And then Naim Alkhouri, who hasn't been with us for, 3 weeks? How are you?
Hey, how are you, my friend? Good to be back.
Okay. And you say you're in San Antonio today?
I am, yes, at the Summit headquarters, just, working with the team. And it's good to be in San Antonio. You're reminded of Stephen and his contribution. It makes me still sad a little bit, but also it's good that we can carry on and continue his legacy.
Okay, excellent point. And a shared sentiment. Scott Isaacs, how are you this afternoon?
Hi, good to see you. Scott Isaacs in Atlanta, Georgia. Glad to be here.
Finally, Zobair Younossi, who's been traveling quite a bit and tells us beforehand that he'd been in India this month, which is right up there with Phoenix and the places I don't want to be in August, but there you are. Zobair, how are you today?
I'm doing good, Roger. No, the part of India I was in was cooler than Washington, D.C. for the first week of August. So I'm glad to be back stateside.
Welcome stateside. So with that, why don't we just quickly groundbreaker, one good thing that's happened in each of our lives in the last week, and then we will dive into this important and timely topic. Brave one, go first.
I spent a week with my granddaughter, my first granddaughter. That you can't beat that with anything in the world. So that was my.
How old is your granddaughter?
She just turned 1.
Fantastic. That's great. Next. And no, you probably can't top that. I might try to tie it, but I don't think I can top it.
I probably can't top that either, but I'm just starting my last week with my daughter before she goes off to college for the first time. So I'm about to be an empty nester.
Oh, wow. Yeah.
I think there's a theme here. Manal, you want to go ahead?
Yeah, you and me both, Scott. So I'm sending my firstborn off to college, but I'm not quite an empty nester. I'm a half nester just yet. But an exciting time. Bittersweet.
Yeah. Naim?
For me, it's actually the opposite. I'm spending more time with my kids. I'm back in Cleveland, Ohio now to lead the Clinical Research Institute of Ohio. Of course, I have my new summit, which is remote, so it allows me to spend more time with the kids, and they just went back to school. So it's been a good move so far, very happy, and the research team is doing well also, so everything is falling in place.
Okay, congratulations for all that. That's great. Zobair, I just took a 2-week vacation spending the first week with my first grandchild, who is now 7, and got to spend time teaching her how to jump waves in the ocean and watching her be a slightly older kid. And if you go to Cape May, it's one of the 2 places in the eastern U.S. where you can see the sun set over water, the other one being the eastern shore of Chesapeake Bay. And watching her eyes as the sun disappeared in the horizon in and of itself would have been worth the price of admission, and the week was just great. So we've got 2 happy grandparents, 1 happy father, and 2 mixed bag parents. And Naim has now become a much more fuller nester. And Zobair, you and I are in various stages of being post-nesters. I think we've got all this covered. So with that, why don't we dive in? For about a year on this podcast, whenever we've talked about what's going to happen next that matters to this community, we said, well, eventually 2 things are going to happen. Europe, they're going to approve resmetirom, and then the country is going to start negotiating price. And then in the U.S. at some point, semaglutide will get approved, and we'll have 2 drugs that will be approved for MASH. Of course, they happen one day after each other, and of course, they happen while I was on vacation, because that's just kind of how my world works. What I'd like to do today is I'd like to take some time and go through it. Ask each of you for what your initial impression was when you saw all this news. And then I've got 4 or 5 questions that I want to make sure we have a little bit of time to cover. But on initial impressions, Brave one, go first, and then we'll go back to specific questions.
I'll go first. And I think in the past maybe 14 months since resmetirom was approved in the United States, and now with resmetirom being approved in the EU and semaglutide being approved in the United States, it is really a sort of a new era and sort of or new energy that has been sort of injected in this field that I feel is very positive for us. So our patients have more and more options, and both research and clinical side of things for MASH and for MASLD is really getting reinvigorated. It was, getting to become a bit discouraging with, repeated sort of failures of drugs in the past when we get to, advanced stages of development and then not show efficacy. So this is a good time to be in this field. And I think both for our patients and for the field, there is a lot of enthusiasm. I think we've got significant and major challenges ahead of us. So that's also exciting in some ways, but it looks like we're going in a direction with a lot of positive energy this time.
Points well made.
I can only echo what Zobair said. For those of us who have been in this drug development pipeline for almost 30 years now, this is a complete sense of fulfillment and satisfaction to now see 2 drugs available for a huge unmet need, and feel like we're making the right strides by our patients who have really had decades of no therapeutic options, short of lifestyle modification, is truly a very fulfilling landmark time in the field of hepatology.
Well put. Next.
I'll go next. I shared the same sentiments. I think these are great developments. You shared this with me, Roger, a while back. You said when you only have one FDA-approved drug, the decision is like, do we treat or do we wait? And unfortunately, with this disease, we had not luxury, but the possibility to wait and tell people to lose weight and come back and just kick the can down the road without really making an impact on their disease. We had resmetirom approved last year, but unfortunately, many providers were still deciding, do we treat, do we wait? I think when you have two drugs approved now, the decision is, which one am I going to use? And I think this is the right attitude that we want, now we have two FDA-approved medications. You need to get your patients with MASH and F2, F3, at least on one of them, and then reassess response in a year or so, and then see if you potentially need to be on two medications. So I think, the future is looking good. I think the pipeline is robust. We expect other approvals before the end of the decade. So it's very fulfilling. I've been in drug development a little bit less than Manal, maybe 15 years now, but still a long time. And to see the success materialize is very fulfilling, career-wise, but most importantly for our patients.
So Scott, what does it feel like from the endocrinology point of view?
Well, it's really exciting to get a new drug approval. Everybody likes that. And, I think it does a lot for the field of MASH, raising awareness, and all the exciting things that all of you all have said. But I hate to rain on the parade, but as an endocrinologist, I will have to say it makes very little difference that this is a drug that's already approved for obesity and for diabetes and for prevention of heart disease in patients with diabetes. And so the majority of our patients are already taking semaglutide for these indications. And so in practical sense, from an endocrinology world, it's not going to change very much.
Okay. We'll come back to that because I understand. I get that. And B, I have a question about it. So, Naim, it's funny you should mention that. I used to say this to marketing research clients for years, but the first time I ever said to a hepatology audience, the first drug is whether and second drug is which, was roughly an hour before Manal talked me out of leaving my marketing research business and consulting to you guys for the rest of my career at hashtag 2020. But yeah, and I think I've been saying something like that ever since. I agree. And the fact that the two drugs work so differently and have such different impacts will, I hope, encourage or enable everybody who touches the disease and knows about the options to understand a little better the complexity and the breadth of what this disease is. And Scott, the question I'm going to come back to with eventually is, I got the idea that goes, it probably isn't going to change how endocrinologists treat, but it's going to change how they think about MASL, or do they think about MASL? We can come back to that later. I want to kind of go through the mainstream first. I'm just planting that for a little bit later. So let me start. What do we think this is going to do to the population of patients, A, that are eligible to be treated or likely to be treated or will be treated? You can take that really on whatever level you want. Zobair, let me toss that one out to you first.
I think the question that you initially asked was a little bit different than what Scott said, which is, what is it doing to the field? I think when you have a drug like this approved and another drug expanded, there is more enthusiasm. There is no doubt in my mind about that. How is it going to change our practice? I do agree with Scott that the patients that I see, they have already the risk factors to be treated with a GLP-1 receptor agonist, and semaglutide is there. So do I see that there is going to be an incredible increase in the number of patients being treated? I really don't think so, because I would say 90% of my patients, when they come to see me, because we are a referral site, meaning that they have already gone to their primary care, and primary care starts them on a GLP-1 receptor agonist for treatment of obesity or type 2 diabetes. By the time they get to me, they've already been there. Now, I have actually had patients recently. In fact, we started some patients recently because the insurance did not cover GLP-1 receptor agonist semaglutide specifically for obesity. So that patient clearly got the benefit of also having semaglutide on board. The other thing, of course, is that, I run the Global MASH Council. So I look at it from a global perspective. The EU extension or approval of resmetirom is also a big deal, because now we're allowing patients in Europe, and I'm hoping that this is going to continue, patients in Asia and Latin America and Australia, to start having options so that not only the drugs are available only in the United States, but also outside the United States. And of course, we're starting with resmetirom because they're ahead by about a year, but I'm sure other drugs are going to come down the pike, and this is going to include the next generation of drugs or combination that will come. I do think that in the gastroenterology side of things, maybe this will allow folks who are sending their patients back to the endocrinologist or the primary care to start a GLP-1 receptor agonist to start treating themselves, especially our APPs. Although most of the gastroenterologists I work with, their APPs have been well-versed, at least historically, in how to use the GLP-1s and semaglutide specifically. So maybe there is going to be a little bit more opportunity for folks to do this. I still think that the options of which drug to use are going to be very interesting to see, is that going to change? But I would start in the fact that I think most of the patients who are going to be on the GLP-1, they already are on it, although it may expand a little bit. So, but the excitement is actually making this available to more practices and more larger proportion of this world.
Any other thoughts on that?
A little bit surprised by the percentages I'm hearing about, the patients on a GLP-1. I'll share data from my own practice, and this is true in Arizona and now in Ohio, that only about 30% of diabetics we see come to us on a GLP-1. And I think this was consistent with the national data in type 2 diabetes. So you'd be surprised. We think that everyone that, qualifies for GLP-1 is getting on it, but even diabetics, still we have a long way to go. And then in our clinics, patients with obesity, with BMI criteria that would qualify for GLP-1, if they don't have type 2 diabetes, only about 10% are coming on a GLP-1. And the issue is, as Dr. Younossi mentioned, it's just hard to qualify them for the obesity indication. They get denied. And then this will be probably another way, utilizing the MASH with F2, F3 indication to qualify them for GLP-1 that will help their liver, but also cardiovascular outcomes. Having said that, I think it's very important to know that being on a GLP-1 is not a guarantee that you're treating your MASH with significant fibrosis. Because again, many patients come to us on a GLP-1, they still have elevated liver stiffness. And sometimes I hear from primary care physicians, like, what's the point identifying MASH with fibrosis if the patient is on a GLP-1, that will take care of it. But that's absolutely not right for many patients that will continue to progress. So if you start a GLP-1, that's a good option, but then you need to monitor and see if they still have evidence of significant fibrosis. Make sure you enroll them in a clinical trial or you start them on resmetirom. So very important. And the other thing is GLP-1s, of course, we have tolerability issues. Many patients that start on a GLP-1 within a year, they're not on the GLP-1. So many nuances, but it is a big deal. I think it's going to help us grow the size of the pie for everyone, identify more patients for both semaglutide and resmetirom. I think we have a long way to go with both medications. At least in my practice, I think many patients will benefit from adding semaglutide and resmetirom.
Okay, so Scott, Manal, I see you both nodding. Go ahead.
Yeah, I agree. When we initially embarked on this global phase 3 study, I would admit I was the first to question whether it will really expand market access for use of GLP-1s, because the majority of our patients with MASH have an approved indication of obesity or diabetes. And the added expansion, maybe overweight patients or obese patients who are not otherwise getting insurance approval may have access now under the indication of MASH being an option for them. I don't know about the added 10% of patients who walk around with lean MASH who might otherwise be prescribed a GLP-1 now in a competitive landscape of 2 medications that are approved, both resmetirom and semaglutide. And I think what we're going to start to see is a patient-centric, individualized approach to management where we can potentially get increased access through insurance for a liver-specific indication. And it will certainly, having now 2 medications approved, heighten awareness. We have been challenged as hepatologists to convince non-hepatology communities that this is an important enough disease to look for, risk stratify, evaluate, or even treat. But now I think there certainly will be heightened awareness in primary care and endocrinology, short of our champion endocrinologists such as Scott here and Ken Kuzi and others. Really, it hasn't penetrated. And now I think this approval will propel a penetration of interest and knowledge and initiative forward to evaluate the liver aspect of this metabolic disease.
I think those are some really great points. And I just want to sort of reiterate that point about just expanding knowledge and awareness among endocrinologists, because we are really focused on using GLP medications, but we're not always so focused on MASH. And I think that endocrinologists don't know how to diagnose F2 and F3 for the most part. So I think this gives us an opportunity to expand the education and to help to understand fibrosis staging. But I think you also bring up a good point that it opens up the access. It's pretty easy to get a GLP for patients with diabetes. And if they don't have diabetes and they just have overweight or obesity, it's only about 30% have coverage. So for that other 2/3 of patients that have obesity but not diabetes and not have coverage, some of those are going to be eligible. And so that's where the education comes into play for practitioners that are not hepatologists, learning how to diagnose stage F2 and F3 so that they can prescribe this medication. I think it's going to be really important. But I still feel the greater benefit is just the expanded awareness that we now have another drug and that all these endocrinologists and primary care doctors know a lot about. And so now it's opened their eyes to MASH.
I think maybe I can add to what everybody. I mean, it really is, and that's probably the biggest benefit of the second drug in the United States, because all boats will rise, because both companies are going to make effort to educate providers in primary care, endocrinology, gastroenterology, APPs, and all societies are going to put out statements. So this competition at the end of the day will benefit the patients, whether it's actually through raising awareness or increasing access. Because, when you have two drugs, then the insurance companies can't start denying treatment that has efficacy in multiple sort of outcomes, especially with the liver and non-liver sort of outcome of this disease. So I think this is the biggest benefit, is that this news will help everybody. I think both companies and that are making these drugs can see more demand, but most importantly, our patients will benefit from this overall increase in chatter about this disease and why it's important. I mean, it's not a day that I look at Instagram and I don't see know about MASH or your risk about MASH. I mean, I've never seen, this is not a daily targeted towards physicians. It's not in LinkedIn or anything like this. This is actually general population awareness sort of programs, and it's good for the field.
Interesting to listen to you, because when I gave this talk in 2020, these were some of the things I was talking about. That it wasn't clear to me that getting past one drug was going to do that much for hepatologist prescribing, but it would do a lot for associated provider, and it would do a lot for related specialties and even primary care, because those are the people who haven't been aware or haven't really understood. So in terms of which professionals will benefit from increased education and public relations and PR and free media and all that stuff, I think all will benefit, but the ones who will benefit most will be the ones who treat a lot of patients who may have MASH and haven't really thought about it or known about it or known what to do about it, number one. Number two, I think Zobair's point is dead on. It's a lot harder for payers to turn down two drugs than it is to turn down one. And also, in the case of Sema, this is a drug that's been around for years. So they can't say, well, gee, we got to wait 6 months and see if there are safety issues here. We already know the answer to all those questions. And resmetirone's been around long enough. So a lot of the avenues that you would use to say no to a new drug you didn't want to pay for, that isn't going to work here as well. And now there are two of them. And to Scott's point, I think, Scott, I completely agree with the idea that goes, the endocrinologist will think more about MASH. Cardiologists will think more about exactly what's in the entire cluster of non-communicable metabolic disease. More primary care docs will step in faster. And frankly, health systems are going to have to figure out how to evaluate patients. Right now, patients aren't necessarily, or 2 years ago certainly, were not standardly evaluated for MASH or MASLD as part of their workups. And that will start to change, if it has, even faster than it has already, because there are more therapeutic options and more awareness. So I agree with all of you. I think the effect is less on the immediate drug sales and more on the explosion of knowledge and what that will bring. And when we get to a third drug or a third mode of action, if you will, even tirzepatide would qualify as a third mode of action by that thinking, because it has GIP, then I think things start to really go crazy, because complexity is the friend of patients getting better treatment early in the process of learning.
On behalf of the surfers, our guests, and our sponsors, Regeneron Pharmaceuticals, Liver Right, and Tawazun Health, thanks for joining us this week.
Please join us again next week. We may have another special roundtable on the resmetirom EMA decision, or this week's FDA guidance on NITs and clinical trials, or our regularly scheduled episode discussing what Roger and Louise each considered the major story of the first half of 2025.
And until next week, stay safe, surf on, and we'll see you again on Surfing Tsunami Podcast. Bye-bye now.